Good afternoon. We're here with Rosalind
Nzinga Vaughn-Nichol.
Okay.
When you get out of here, I'll talk to you guys later.
We have the Moody Jones Gallery. Rosalind is a storyteller, and her work showcases her African American experiences. Her grandmother had an impact early in her life, and her artistic life as we hope she will share. She was born in here. That's flat, real flat out there.
It's not all flat. It's, it's got some little hills here and there.
And spend some time with what I find interesting places on our artistic journey. We're going to dive into her motivation behind her work. And there are folks here who know who she is, and there are folks here who are some of her collectors. The show is called, I'm going to say Pulp Story.
Pulp Story.
Pulp Story. It's a lot easier for me. That first word is
Alkebulan. Which means that's the only indigenous name for Africa that there ever was. Mm. The word Africa is Eurocentric, but Alkebulan was the original name that the people called the land. Wow.
And we wanted to showcase an artist whose work speaks truth to the meaning spiritually, culturally, and figuratively to its essence. So, Rosalind, what is your motivation as you approach your work?
My motivation for my work is first spirit, because I'm a spirit, I'm very tuned into my relationship with God. And as I was telling you the last time I was here, I may move mediums around a little bit, but I wait to see what the artwork is going to be. I follow it, I don't lead it. I may start something, but I just keep looking at it till the narrative comes. Because while I'm working, it's almost like a worshipful experience. It's the closest I'm a prayer warrior and a worshiper, but I tell you, when I'm doing my work, that's the nearest, the closest I feel to God. I just get swept up. It's Him and I, and it's really this kind of seamless collaboration. And one good example about the spiritual connection, I did a piece of work maybe close to 10 years ago, and it's just been in my work, so I put the piece in there. A lady came in, looked at the piece, grabbed her chest, and tears started swelling up in her eyes. And she told me what the piece meant for her. So it was such an important, I really had this epiphany, this understanding then that the work passed through you. If it doesn't sell right now, maybe the person is for is not there yet. But there's always this spiritual connection between me and my work. And, and I think the people that buy it, I hope that that's the thing that there's some spiritual connection with them.
So tell us about the mediums that you work with. And I know you make your own. I was here earlier with other artists who was talking about the process, which I find very interesting. It seems to be a process with
It is a wet process. And when I lived in New Jersey, I had a large wet studio. I now have a dry studio, so I'm learning to make paper in a dry environment. And as you can see, some of my pieces are large, and so I'm actually getting ready to rent studio space so I can do some more large work because it is a wet process, and you do need room. One of the things I'm excited about as a paper maker is when I started making paper close to over 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of people of color that were making paper that I knew of, but now there's this whole new generation of artists and paper makers, and I'm just really excited for that. So since I was young, I don't know why exactly, but I've always collected paper and textiles, little bits of this and that. And I actually brought this dress, which, because sometimes I want to start 30 or 40 before it ends up in work. I don't know. It depends on where it belongs. But this little dress, I paid $1,800. I've been pulling off of it for a couple years. You can see that this is obviously came from somebody that didn't have a lot of other dresses. And this was cherished hand stitched. And so I've been putting pieces of work. So one of the things that I like to do is embed disintegrating textiles in my art. Disintegrating lace, my mother, my aunts, my grandmother, they were all people that did lace and crochet and things like that. And I always think those are anonymous artists and nobody knows their names. We see their pieces at vintage shops and places like that. So I really have a large collection of lace. And some of my work, as you can see, I embed lace into.
When you say toy, you're talking about taking strips of the fabric?
Yeah, so I can do this, so don't get nervous. But this thing is so disintegrating that it literally is falling apart. I like when textiles are like that because they just marry into the paper. Paper making is a wet process. While it's wet, I'm embedding things in there or laying them on top. And this little dress is golden to me because it's just so frail. And so I love lace and things like that when they're falling apart. One of the things I do, if I find something that's really old but it's still pretty much intact, I don't care that it's into my collection. And I remember when I read that Matisse traveled with 3 trunks of textiles with him, then I stopped feeling guilty because I have these little boxes of lace and stuff. You know, I'm not going to use them, but they just inspire. I'll pull them out and play with them. But if something's disintegrating, that would take it apart. It's kind of hard for me to take away vintage and antique textiles if it's not already falling apart.
Now, tell us about, you look throughout the gallery space, the different subject matter. I mean, do you take time or do you let the paper create whatever the papers create and you add to it?
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, I follow the work. One good example of a work that was hard for me to birth is the one in the, it's called Children is Coming. And I usually do softer narratives. That was so intense that I stuck it under my sofa for almost a year, upside down, because I didn't want to finish it. It was just more intense than I wanted to deal with, but I knew I had to finish it. So
I'm going to walk to the picture you're talking about.
Okay.
And I trust this piece here.
yes.
This is a very powerful piece.
It's a strong piece. It was a hard piece for me to complete because every piece to me is like and I was following it, but I wanted it to go somewhere else. It was like, come on, let's make this softer. Let's softer this story. And then I had a friend said, one day, Rosalind, I hope you get to the point where you won't feel a need to soften your story. And I think since 2020, when, you know, with the death of, somebody help me out, George Floyd, you know, I've always been doing pretty much, my work is very feminine, but I just begin to gain a deeper appreciation for Black men and what it takes to be a Black man in this country. And since 2020, I've been incorporating a lot of men into my work. And I think that had been my first one. And so it was really a push to yield to the work. Because I follow the work. I don't lead it, I follow it.
And you mentioned that, you know, it comes from within the spirit, within you is your connection with the work that you produce. You know, is it the spirit that's primary or is it something else?
Well, you know, inspiration comes, you know, it's always spirit, you know, because spirit is always speaking to all of us. You can look at, you know, hopefully after I'm gone, somebody can look at my work and they'll gain a sense of me somehow through the work. I can look at Romare Beards' work, one of my mentors. He's no longer living, but I can look at his work and maybe know something about him. So in my mind, spirit is always there. Spirit remains even after you're long gone. But some things, you know, like if I see something on the news, like every time another Black person got killed, you know, my heart was, you know, a little tiny piece of me died. I'm sure a lot of you guys know it didn't have to be our children. It was somebody's children. And, so a lot of this piece here, I have been collecting the names of people that were killed. Starting when I noticed that when Obama became president, that it seemed like there was an intensity of young people getting killed. So I started collecting names in this file. So sometime around 2014 or 15, I thought I've got to do something to memorialize these names. They'll just be a soundbite for a year or so in somebody, some newsroom. But I wanted them to live. So I started with the killing of the young man in New York, and somebody can help me out with him. He was killed in 1999.
Obama, Thiago.
Yes, him. He was I start with him, and then I come on up to whatever year I finish is, I think 20 or 21. And then I thought about adding the people that done since then, but I just decided that this was to memorialize these people. The youngest person on here is 13. The oldest is 67. It's the date that they were killed, their name, and their age.
Wow.
And the title of this piece is "Why Are Her Seeds Falling to the Earth?"
Oh my God.
That's the question. Why? I mean, how can you be afraid of somebody running from you? How can you shoot someone 15 times who has their hands raised in the air? Why are her seeds falling to the earth? That's the question this piece has.
That's interesting.
Yeah, very.
Into my next question. I once read that art is not always about pretty things.
It's really not. For me, it was my way to come to terms with what's been happening. I mean, I am not a biological mother, but I'm a spiritual mother, and I just can't, like I said, every time someone, something happens to one, a little piece of me was feeling that. So, this piece was hard, not because I didn't want to create something pretty, but it's just the intensity of it. I mean, I'm looking at composition and the aesthetics of it, but I do work intuitively. I just kind of put down what comes to me without paying attention of is it pretty or will somebody like it. If it still speaks to me 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I feel good.
So,
yes.
So as a collector, if a collector came to you and said, look, Rosalind, I want you to create a piece for me, do you tell the person, well, if I create something, I'm creating what motivates me, what spiritually I connect with? Or if the person says, well, I want something that demonstrates this, are you able to create based on what a collector may ask you for, like somebody asked for a portrait or something?
I don't really do commission work unless a person gives me the freedom to do. They can say a color range, or like I'm working with they have some things they want me to embed in the paper. If you just give me some things and give me the freedom to work that, then because I'm always trying to make sure it's authentic. I got to stay with my authentic self. And if I do something at your direction, that's your direction. That's not mine. If you're free enough to trust me and trust the spirit in me to create something, then yes.
Do you want your work to be inspiration?
I do. And I think, because I feel like I don't have biological children. These are my children. This is what's going to live on beyond me. And so I like it, like when I saw the lady grab her chest, or people come up to me and say, I see your work online, but it's not the same as seeing it in person. I mean, when you see the work in person, it just reads differently. And so that really blesses me, because to me, my work is intimate. And you've got to come into that intimacy to really feel it.
The one thing that I've found about your work is how you identify name associated with the piece. And for example, the piece that's behind it, how did you come up with the name for it? I mean,
well, he's the guardian. And I started with this piece of paper I maybe had for 10 years. I don't know where it came from. But I saw this headpiece. And then I found this space, and his eyes are so intense. To me, he's, like I said, since 2020, I've been incorporating more men. This is really a part of the triptych here. He's the guardian. This is hope. And on the other side is joy. And but he is, if you'll notice, his necklaces are all these faces of people that are looking You can call him the God figure if you want to. But you see, the thing that is, to me, is those piercing of those eyes, that he is protecting. That he is protecting the people. And so, after I found that face and then that headpiece, then, you know, the old antique story of how, because I'm always working in paper and things like that. This wild steel here came from Turkey, which I'm just not found able to get more of it. But like I said, once I started working and followed, it's not hard to follow the work. It's harder to try to lead the work. That's what I find hard. Well, if I want to make something pretty, like you said, it's like I'm going to just make this face. I'm going to make it do that. And that's all contrived for me. If I just put something down, if I'm trying to finish something too fast, and I know it feels inauthentic, I just have to stop. Because I'm always listening, because to me, if I listen, the art will speak to me. That's kind of how I'm living my life, actually, at this late stage life, because I feel like if we would just listen to our spirits more, we'd probably get into less trouble. Mm-hmm. Because spirits always talking to us, but we're just not listening.
So what as a collector, you know, there's some collectors in this world, what is it that you want them to draw from your pieces, aside from the fact that you like it, it look nice in a certain part of your house, but beyond that, I always feel that if you're true to the art, that there's the artist can kind of conceptualize.
Say it again.
If you're true to the art, artists like yourself would recognize it.
Yeah, I really feel like work should speak to you. I was talking to a gentleman a few months ago about work, and he was telling me this piece he had and how valuable it was, and it was going up, and never once did he mention the name of the piece, the composition of the piece. And so in my mind, that was just an acquisition that he collected that didn't speak to him. And I think, you know, an artist may become very famous and the work may go up or it may not. But you have to pick art that speaks to you. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't speak to you, you know, then you're not being authentic to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about art pioneers, those who came before you or who may be present that you find inspiration in or from. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I have several artists. Romero Bearden is probably, you know, for maybe when I was in Indiana, we didn't have anything about black artists or black studies, but I found a little card with one of his jazz ensembles, and I carried that with me, and it stayed on my refrigerator most of my home before I ever knew who he was. So he's one of my mentors. Janet Taylor Pickett, she's a living artist, but she and I have been great friends for over 20 years. The dialogue we had back and forth about art is priceless to me, and so I trust her, and we've been good friends for a long time. I also, Matisse, he's someone, and there's really a lot of artists. I was thinking about the question, that there's so many artists that I feel like mentor me, and I follow, and there's like this whole young group of artists. I'm going to mess her name up. Let me see if I can say it. She's a young paper maker and a potter, but I just met her last year. She came down to our studio. She's part of a show, Hear Me Now, that was at the Met. I'm going to mess up her name. Abune. Anyway, please forgive me. I stand wrong, but I'm just so fascinated by her work. I love Abisa Butler because, again, she's a textile artist. There's just a lot of artists, and I can say, I can find inspiration in almost anybody else's work. If I look at it, really get into it, I can find inspiration in anybody's work.
I noticed that since we had this show here at the space, and since you've been here, that you told me that there were some artists, and there's some artists that were present here today. And you, to me, like I like an educator. You go up to them and you're free with giving them some suggestions and advice and input. Is that something that really?
Oh, absolutely. I think about that. So that's the show that Art and Atrium, which I'm one of the board members of, we have at the Moore Museum right now. Each one teach one, because I think in all phases of life it's our duty to look behind us and to help those people that come behind us. So yeah, I'm always available when I do curating work with Art and Atrium. I always try to present the artist in the best light. It's important to me that I handle that person's work with care, like somebody handles mine with care. And, I just feel like Jan has been so generous to me over the years. She was kind of my example for how you share. I've met artists who are kind of feel like they need to guard their secrets, but I think for the most part, most artists are generous to share in their time and their energy, because we have that kinship. We have that, artists have, we carry this burden about work. If you're not working, there's just something that you can identify with that creates that I feel like we should be generous with one another.
Do you feel that you have a place, I know you're still around, a place, or you wish that you would have a place of history?
Of course.
In terms of what you have.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think I was really encouraged last year when I had to put some older work in the shows that have been studied, and how people just really engaged in their work and felt it. And I'm always reminded of Van Gogh. He died thinking he was just a failure. He didn't sell any work before his death, because artists are always kind of ahead of the time. So I feel like, if my work isn't gotten now, that I hope that at some point it will be. I do, pay attention to my work, with my collectors and my accounts over there. I'm going to sit up with trust, because I think I want to handle my work the best I can. And I've seen other people pass away, and if somebody doesn't take authority over the work. And
you said something interesting in your response. You mentioned that it's important that you have a place, and you also mentioned that you put out some older work, which I find interesting, because I've been being in this business and starting out the collector. I always would ask, let me see some of your older stuff. Because, the older stuff shows the struggle of the artist. And you want, and you find that you try to create for what people believe they want to see. And sometimes the older work is what people really want to see. And as a collector, I think like that.
that's really interesting that you say, because I really did struggle at first. When I introduced paper making, I've always been a painter. I do watercolors kind of as a little meditation in the morning. There's some here at the office. So I've always been a painter, but when I became a paper maker, I struggled how to merge those mediums. And some people look at my first paper making work and said, what is that? I mean, so yeah, I mean, it was a kind of a painful process, but I feel like I finally got to a place where I feel good about how I married the mediums together that I work with. And I try not to think so much about what somebody else is. It's hard to keep everybody's voices out of your head. But I try when I'm working, I don't get on social media. I try to just focus in and listen. And, I just try to make what comes out of me be authentic.
So what do you got in store coming up? So tell us, what's your forward vision of what your art may look like? Do you have one, or
yes.
do you just want to see what happens spiritually?
Well, I'm not seeing what happens, but I am feeling the peace behind this lady here, this Birthing Humanity. I love that piece because it marries paper making, collage, and even some painting in there. And so I think for me, the next level of my paper making is that I want to merge more into the collage. This installation piece in the front, which I want to talk about later, that's handmade paper, and then there's collage hanging off the back of it. But while I was doing this piece that's not in this show, it's called So Great a Cloud of Witness. I don't know if you've seen that, Adrian, but while I was doing that work, I really felt in my spirit, we're not just who we are, but we're the generations that came before us. And so in each one of my figures in that piece, you'll see all these different heads and pieces of bodies, because we're more than just who we are. We're all the people that came before us. If you look at that piece above the installation piece, that's called a departure. I mean, they're just people that are kind of in chaos and concerned because they don't know where these people go. But if you look at that lead figure, that she's the matriarch, and inside of her dress, can you see all those different heads? So I'm kind of in that place right now where I'm thinking about the layers of who we are, because it's not just who we are, but we're our grandparents, our great-grandparents in the front. And our great-grandparents have their great-grandparents. So we're all those generations that came before us. So I'm really working on exploring that some more with my collage and embedding paper into it.
So at this point, I kind of want to see if there's anybody in this group that's sitting around that may have a question. If they have a question.
I do. Do you do very much with old newspaper clippings? Do you incorporate that into it?
I don't so much because of the quality of the paper.
Yes.
So when you're making paper, you have to think about the quality. I mean, for kids, you can do that kind of stuff, but it's a low-rated paper, it's fragile, and so I try to think about the longevity of my work. I usually cut my images out of magazines or photographs, but no, I usually don't use a newspaper clipping. Because years from now, I think it's important that we pay attention to what we embed in our work, because years from now, somebody that collected our work, they don't want to see things sort of disintegrate. As a work. And actually, Romero Bearden, he used to do his collages with whatever he could find around, and years later, some of his collages were popping up a little bit. I mean, that's real things that happen. You get the men of the passion, this graph. And somebody told me about a good place to get inexpensive canvases, and I thought, you might take that down the road. So you list your name and your credibility on this work, and you have to talk about it. That's a good question.
Go ahead, and then
you were talking about this is a spiritual practice for you. So I was wondering, when you sit down to create a new piece, or maybe like do a study or something, is there like a process instead of like a recording?
No, not necessarily. I mean, my roots were just getting quiet and praying and walking, meditating and scripture. But when I start my work, I just pull out me. Unless something's happened. If something has happened from a solemn humanity, or very sensitive to the earth, the limit of our earth, and how we love the poor community. So when something is really on my heart, then that will draw me to something specific. Otherwise, I just maybe find something that I'm inspired by, and I said, I'm going to use that in something. I may not even know what that something was, which was this quilt behind me called Honoring the Old Way. And I just started sewing together these pieces of that it was something about the fabric that was reminding me of how we were. We make do with whatever we got. There's some pieces that are real tiny scraps, there's other big pieces, there's some embedded cotton that I brought from North Carolina with me. But it wasn't until the last week that I saw the woman in there. You see the woman in there? Her hair blowing back?
Yeah.
I didn't see her until the last week, and I said, oh my goodness.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
So, I'm just, I'm always excited to find out what a piece is going to be. I know if I just really don't try to run ahead of it, I'm going to, find something that, is really, really speaks to me, and I hope it'll speak to somebody else as well. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about, you mentioned this whole concept of legacy. And you mentioned the art in the atrium, and each one teach one is now at the museum, preserving our legacy in perpetuity. So I love the fact that you're concerned about our legacy. I'm concerned about the quality of the work. So can you tell us, have you thought about, when you talk about the trust, have you thought about the role of art, and particularly African-American art from the diaspora, how it fits into investment? How it fits into that investment and building generational wealth.
That may be a tricky question for me, Stephanie, in this regard, because I have this to say about when we collect art. I think that if you really want to support artists, you pay them what they've asked for their work. You don't always go to auctions where you might think you might, but you're supporting the artist, you support their community. But I am, this thing that's going on right now, all these institutions and places that are opening the door and bringing Black artists and artists of color to the table, I hope that stays open. I'm very concerned about, we're finding artwork with images of people of color that go all the way back thousands of years that we didn't even know existed before. So I'm interested in the whole story coming out. I am interested in our work, because there's some amazing artwork out here. There's some amazing artists, and I am interested in that dialogue staying at the table, because to me, what's fascinating about, and I realize a lot of my images are Afrocentric, but I think about the fact that we left one culture, we came to a very hostile culture, and we created this very vibrant community that now influences people all around the world. So, to me, Black people are so amazing. I'm not anti-anybody else, but I'm just so enamored with Black people and how we can dance in the air and not even realize we're dancing and make magic out of, my grandmother, who you said influenced me, yes, because my grandmother would take a garment like this, she would carefully take all the thread out and wind it up, she'd take off all the buttons, and that piece of fabric may turn out to be a cushion or something else. But, she grew up in the Depression era. We had to make do with what we had, and I sort of thrive on incorporating stuff. So when it comes to the monetary value of it, some artists' work is going to be in that range to help probably generational wealth. But I also like to say this, that there are a lot of people that spend so much money on external stuff that sometimes I just find it daunting. I can't even think about that if they would, the stuff is going to disintegrate in a few years. So I think if people value more work and pass that on, you would have generational wealth just in that your people coming after you will see you in that work. The things I value most are things that came from my grandmother. I have my great-great-grandmother's quilt, which I have lovingly restored. That's probably the most precious textile I have. So to me, William, if you pass something on to your grandchildren, they will know you through what you did. Or Stephanie, they will look at your collection. And so I don't know if it's exactly monetary, but it does make us rich.
Yes,
it does make us wealthy. And I think if we would really pull apart, I'm not knocking anybody, but if we would really pull apart why we're spending thousands of dollars on false stuff, and really start to think about what's important going further. Because it's all about coming from the inside to the outside. Now, I understand. I'm not,
I think you're right.
Even the Egyptians used to, adorn their hair. But I'm just saying we spend so many thousands of dollars on that.
I'm gonna jump in and add to what you're saying is that art does create generational wealth. And we need to teach our kids the importance of collecting art as a vehicle to create generational wealth. Because the people who don't look like us have done that all their lives.
Well, yes, absolutely.
And something that as an artist, of course you want full value for what you're paying for, but as a collector, yes. Art, to me, is like real estate. It's a collectible item that has value. And the way you get us out of our present situation is to give us the ability to understand how there are things in this world that if we touch and we hold on to, we can pass it to other generations, and we can create a legacy of wealth.
Yes, well, that's true, because, yeah, that's really good. And I wasn't meaning to discount that some artists will, I guess I always want people to say that you will collect somebody's work, and if it gave you value in the process, then kudos.
Just a bonus.
That's a bonus. But you should collect what you like. You should collect what you enjoy. Don't you agree with that? Or
I agree with that, but at the same time, I agree that there's a base, and what you pay for that base doesn't depreciate. It doesn't devalue itself. It only increases. You got to think like that.
yes.
And artists need to think that way because eventually, artists' works. I had a friend. I won't mention the person's name. But we were talking about art, and I was suggesting certain artists should be at a certain museum, and the person told me that, well, the person's not dead yet, and they died. I just took offense to that. I said, you know,
Yes.
it makes no sense to me that you have to die for people to recognize your work. You know, there's living artists who are recognized who aren't dead. And when it comes to us, there's some difference. And I struggle with that. I try to tell artists of color to always remember the struggle and always stay encouraged.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because.
And you are a very encouraging person.
Yes.
You are.
Well, thank you. I think I try to live my life that way because I am a spiritual person, and I think that if we're not really touching each other, then we are. I won't say we're wasting our time, but I don't know what we're really.
We're not
doing
in purpose.
here in the earth realm.
We're not in
You gotta
purpose.
think about leaving something behind.
Yes.
Some kind of legacy.
Some kind of
And I think the older I get, the less I worry about positioning or where I am, but I'm thinking more about what can I turn around and say to the person who left behind me, because somebody turned around and looked at me.
Yes. Oh, yes. Hold on.
Any other questions? Come on, man. I know there's some out there. That's a profession.
I was just, so you amassed a lot of work over the years, and you have a number of pieces here. I was just curious, of the pieces that are in this room, what time frame is that spanning?
Well, this piece is the oldest right here. This is one of my very first pieces of paper when I was trying to figure it all out by myself before I went and got lessons.
And this is called Uncle Tom's Cabin. Right?
Revisit it, yes.
Revisit it.
Because I never read Uncle Tom's Cabin as a child. When I read the book, I was in tears. I had to do something with all that energy. So this quilt is really about the gentility of the South and all that lacing, but underneath there was the blood. And I just kept seeing, my goodness, that's where our families begin to be broke up. So you see the children with soul marked on them. And so then you'll see a little book there. I still had to address these characters in Harriet Beecher Stowe's book. So in my book is Uncle Tom's journal. And he's speaking back to these people, the guy with the dirty hands that grabbed the girl. And I carved out the cavity of an actual book and put his little journal in, which is where he would have. But I had to somehow address that book. And so this is my oldest piece, and probably the newest piece are these black and whites that started coming out in the 20s. I've been doing 2020s. I started doing a lot of these figurative things. And then this quilt was probably the last, well, actually the installation, but the installation was a combination of some older pieces. But the quilt and the piece next to William, those two are the newest pieces. And that piece is all about night memory and the things that we know more than we actually know that we know. And some of that stuff is floating around in us, and it's from our DNA and RNA, and so that's what that piece is about.
Well, any other questions?
I wanted to say one thing about my installation piece, and this kind of ties to what you said. This, even though this is kind of a work from a little bit different periods, it all goes into my idea of collective memory about this birth in humanity, which came from the continent of Africa through mitochondrial DNA, and that, you know, in that regard, all people on the earth are African. But I just wanted to say that, you know, there's a richness and a beauty to be celebrated. And that's what I want people to do. So I did an earlier show last year called Collective Memory. And so when I came here, it was just a kind of continuation of that in my post story, because I'm telling the story of the beauty of Black people, and I want people to see that beauty in my images, but not just for us, but just as a part of humanity, as a face of humanity.
Well, Rosalind, I must say, this has been an enjoyable talk. I'm sure we can talk more. And I will, you know, the art being in this space is well appreciated.
Thank you so much, Adrian.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the folks who've come and witnessed the work just talk about how different it is. And, you know, collectors look for different things. I mean, and I haven't seen anything like this. I've been seeing a lot of art like that. So I have to applaud you.
I want to say, actually, you encouraged me with this piece here. I brought it to you, and I thought, well, I'm still working on it. You said, looks finished to me. And you really encouraged me because you got it. You got me. And so I thank you. You've been really just so easy to work with, and I appreciate the experience of being able to hang my work here. And I want to say thank you to all of you that came out today to talk to you, and the people that joined us live. I thank you so much for your time. I don't take it for granted, and I'm just appreciative. You know?
Nice.